Hi, my name is Sue, and I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is April 28, 2009. Welcome, everyone, to today's Threads of Recovery workshop. I have stated I am an alcoholic. Do we have any other alcoholics in the room? Welcome, everyone. Wonderful. Acknowledging God's presence in a moment of silence, with a moment of silence. I'll follow that with a set-aside prayer, please. Set-aside prayer. Lord, help me set aside everything I think I know about you, everything that I think I know about myself, everything that I know about my fellows, everything I think I know about my own recovery, for a much needed new experience in you, myself, and my fellows, and a new experience in my own recovery. Help me see the truth. Amen. 1058 Threads of Recovery continues to offer virtual workshops 5 days a week and sometimes even Saturday, just like today. To be included in our weekly email, send your request to threads1058@gmail.com. This will keep you up to date on all our workshops. Our group follows the 12 traditions. We stick to our singleness of purpose. We ask that everyone act as if they are sitting in a live meeting. Please turn your camera on if possible. We would love to see your smiling faces. The 7th tradition states every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. The contributions help to cover the group's expenses, but the 7th tradition is more than simply paying for rent and other group expenses. It is both a privilege and a responsibility of individual groups and members to ensure that our organization at every level remains forever self-supporting and free of outside influences that might divert us from our primary purpose. The monetary amount of each contribution is secondary to the spiritual connection that joins us in unity with AA groups around the world. 7th tradition contributions can be made using Venmo to at Threads of Recovery 1058. Details are in the chat. This is an open meeting. Open meetings are available to anyone interested in Alcoholics Anonymous program of recovery from alcoholism. Non-alcoholics are welcome to attend open meetings as observers. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce to you our speaker for today. Please help me, everybody, welcome my beautiful, lovely friend, Holly S. from Montreal, Canada, on the topic of 10-step workshop. Welcome, my love. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you for organizing all this. Thanks to Threads of Recovery, and thank you for Debbie for chairing this meeting. My name is Holly, and I am an alcoholic. Very grateful to be here. I will also say that I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon because this is an open meeting. And I'd like to welcome all the men in the room today. We have done a survey. It turns out women have more resentments than men. That's just who shows up for the 10th step. So you're all very, very brave. And of course, here just to listen. But the second half of this workshop will be sharing and participation. So stay tuned for that. We're here because in Alcoholics Anonymous, it tells us to work on character building. That's what it tells us. I know we think that we're coming in because we have a drinking problem or a problem with alcoholism. They tell us we have an allergy, we have a mental obsession, but in steps 5, 6, and 10, it actually tells us that the point, the thesis of this big book, right, that we study, which is we're in a reading group, a book club of one book, that it's good character and character building. And that's what we're trying to do in step 10. In step 4 and 5, we went through the wreckage of our past. We went all the way back to kindergarten. For me, it was Jeanette Farley and what she did to me and so on and so forth. But then we go through 6 and 7, we start to mature, we start to get a little time behind us. We do 8 and 9, we clear up the wreckage of our past. And now step 10 is something, and we're going to be using the C word. I hope that doesn't offend anybody, but the C word today is continue. They're going to use that multiple times. The C word is mentioned in step 10, and we're going to be reading from the 12 and 12 as well as the big book today. And I'm just kind of condense it all for you of how we're going to get through that 10th step, which is to continue for a lifetime doing. So supposedly until we die, we can keep doing this 10th step. It is my experience. I personally don't run out of 10th steps. Yay! I always have new resentments to talk about at my workshops, never the same old script over and over again. They just keep coming back. I didn't have a lobotomy. I have had some psychic changes and some spiritual awakenings, but I have the same alcoholic brain, and I have to retrain it every 24 hours, to keep spiritually fit. And we'll talk about that today. So let's start on page 84. We've just gone through the 9th step promises, which they say we will materialize if we work for them, which is, this freedom that we're going to get. And for me, the working for them is in step 10. All right, halfway down the page on page 84. This thought of always materializing brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue, there they start right off with that C word, to take personal inventory and continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. So in that first sentence, I've already heard steps 8, 9, 10. First of all, it says we continue to take personal inventory. That's where I went wrong. For the first 7, 8, let's be honest, 10 years of my sobriety, I was deliciously and satisfactorily taking your inventory. That's what I was doing. It was immature and it was not character building. And I admit it today. I couldn't admit it then, but I couldn't wait to read my 4th step and my 5th, write my 4th step and read my 5th step to my sponsor. And I did. I had done 2 5th steps with 2 different sponsors by the time I was 7 years sober. And no one corrected me that I was taking your inventory instead of mine. You were wrong. You were a turkey. You had done something to me. It wasn't fair. I was a victim. I was a scapegoat. I was a martyr. I had all sorts of, acrimonious acronyms before my title of Holly. And that was what was going on for me. And I couldn't realize why I was so depressed, demoralized, ungrateful, sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous at 6 years sober, except that I was taking your inventory. And when it was finally pointed out to me that I was supposed to be taking my inventory, there was a shift. There was a huge shift that started to happen. And all of a sudden, it went from my world of them to us. You know how it starts off with we. The first word is we in a lot of the chapters of the big book. We did not even come into my consciousness when I was in early sobriety. It was all about you doing to me, and there was only me until I got to the 10th step. So, and then it says to continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. Well, that says to me that I have to go back to 8 and 9. And so if I'm going up and down, the steps, I call them, the keys to a piano, up and down, and I'm going, that's where I want to be in the steps. I don't want to say I've completed the steps. I've done the steps, because I'm never going to do the steps. I'm going to continue for a lifetime. And this is how I continue. When I suddenly realize that there's a resentment and it crops up, I'm going to look at my personal inventory. And after I thoroughly look at my personal inventory, I may have an amends to make. So I have to go back to 8 and 9. If I don't think I have an amends to make, I'm still thinking you're a turkey, even though I'm trying to take my inventory. I have to go back to 6 and 7 and say, what is the defect of character that I am not allowing God to come in and take away? Not me, because I'm not that powerful, but God to come in and take away. Then it says, we vigorously, that means with lots and lots and lots of action, commenced, started, because there's no graduation date in Alcoholics Anonymous. So it's always a beginning. commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past, which in step 10 should be the last 24 hours. 4 and 5, we're going all the way back. But the 10th step should really be in the last 24 hours. So if I'm not doing this on a daily basis, I may have a 10th step that's been brewing for a week, a month, a season, a lifetime that I've left off in 4 and 5, but I can still clean it up in 10. We have entered the world of the spirit. Now, any word that is capitalized in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous is another word for God. So if God is offensive to you, use spirit, use Czar of the heavens, nature, universe, life. There are 38 words, and you can find them between Bill's story and we agnostics. That's how I put together my higher power. That was an exercise that was given to me years ago. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is a link between here and page 64 in our resentments when we're first writing out 4 and 5. Understanding and effectiveness. What does that mean? So I think you're a turkey. I think you're wrong. You have done something to me. I am feeling wounded, hurt, angry, sore about it. How can I be useful and effective? How can I be understanding when I am thinking that the world and all its people have stepped on my toes? I can't be. And, we've been told from the beginning that this is our purpose. This is how helping another alcoholic, we are going to get out of ourselves and feel better. So as long as I'm in resentment, I can't be effective like that. I can't go on to the 12th step when I have these resentments, because guess what? I'm going to get these resentments towards my sponsees. I'm sure that's only me. I'm sure none of you have ever been resentful at a sponsee for not doing what you have suggested or not going at a pace where you thought they should be. It has happened once or twice to me, and I have to go back to step 10. Phew. Here's a promise. This is not an overnight matter. Oh, hallelujah. It should, C word, continue for our lifetime. Good. So my new motto for my tombstone is pace yourself. And I share that with you, because I'm not going to clear all this up in 24 hours. I'm not going to just be better. I'm not going to graduate. I'm going to continue for a lifetime. I am 49 years old. My sobriety date is August 30th, 1997. I was 23 years old when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, 2 days after my 23rd birthday. And I can tell you, at 26 years and 2 months sober, I feel like I'm just starting to see the light. Just starting after a quarter of a century. All right, so here's the 5 parts of step 10 that we're going to highlight in our big book that we don't have in step 4 and 5. Because don't forget, step 4 and 5, we're in the kindergarten of spirituality. Now we're in our teens, maybe 20s, but here we are. So the first one is watch. Circle that word watch. That's number 1. Continue, there it is again, to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up, our next word to circle is God. We ask God at once to remove them. God. Again, if I don't have God, I have to go all the way back to 2 and 3, maybe 6 and 7, to make sure that I know that I'm not trying to solve this, that I'm not the solution. To remove these at once. And then 3, our third word is discuss. We, not me, not you, but we discuss them with someone immediately. Could be my sponsor, could be another fellow. I have a small circle of women I call with my 10th steps. They know when I call, I say, I've got a 10th, they get serious. Okay, let me hear it, We discuss it with someone immediately and make circle number 4, amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. Because that hanging over my head, I never want to go through that long list of 8 and 9 again. And then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. Circle that help word. So we're watching, we're godding, we're discussing, we're amending, and we're helping. Why is help in there? Help isn't in 4 and 5. We're so far from helping another person. We're in 4 and 5, right? Because there's lots of work to do on ourselves. Why is help in there? Because if I stay down in the mire and the bog of that cock-a-doo-doo that I am in, of my resentment and my 10th step, I'm going to keep obsessing. I'm going to keep thinking about it. I'm going to say, I wish I had said this. I wish I had done this. I hope they fall over a rock and hurt themselves. Like it's just going to keep going round and round until I resolutely turn to help someone else. What does that look like? I don't know. I could drive my son to school. I could offer a neighbor some help. I could call somebody and, the longest conversation in the world, start an alcoholic with, how are you? That is a conversation starter with an alcoholic. How are you? Could go on for hours or days or weeks, right? So that's how I'm going to get out of myself. That's how I'm going to help. Then it tells me love and tolerance of others is our code. It is? I had no idea. I thought licking my wounds and being the victim was my code. But it's told me all in this one paragraph. It summed everything up to me. That understanding and effectiveness and love and tolerance of others is our code. Who knew? I did not know in steps 1 through 9. I really didn't. I really did not. And so here I am going along in Alcoholics Anonymous, wondering, why am I not happy, joyous, and free? Why am I not grateful? Why am I not feeling akin to my fellows? Because there was an us and them going on. There was a whole West Side Story musical going on in my head. And I don't know if I was the Sharks or the Jets. Maybe I was both. Maybe there was a third that I wasn't even aware of, But I have to know that I'm part of a brotherhood, a sisterhood, where we are all God's children, where there are no grandchildren of God. We are all God's children. And so if you are a child of God and I am a child of God, then I am criticizing his work by hating on you deeply. All right, so there's promises. 10-step promises. Next paragraph. And we have ceased fighting anything or anyone. Why are they talking about that? We've been talking about alcohol for so many pages in the big book, really up until page 65 is step 1. But now all of a sudden they're talking about me fighting anything or anyone. And then there's this long pause, even alcohol, because alcohol is but a symptom. I'm getting it down to causes and conditions. I'm looking for patterns in my own behavior. And I'll tell you, every single time somebody in the world says to me, are you sure? My back goes up. Because when I was a little girl, my mother never believed what I was saying. Holly, you're making that up. Now, my mother was on pills. She had memory lapses because of the pills that she was taking. So I would recount things to her that had happened, and she would say, I don't think so. I think you're making it up. So if I'm anywhere in the world and somebody says, are you sure, Holly, are you making that up? I go out of my mind. I go from 0 to atomic. I just explode with anger and rage, and I can feel my body. And I have to pause and say, I don't even know this person. This person, I'm hysterical because it's historical. Have you heard that one? I'm hysterical because it's historical. And it's taken me all the way back when I was a defenseless little girl and my mother was on pills and she was depressed and lying in bed and couldn't remember what had happened. And so she would call me out on stuff. And I have to pause. And I have to think, this is a stranger. They are not part of my history. I'm just going to stick to my guns here. I'm going to ask God for help. I'm going to invite him in. I'm going to grow in effectiveness and understanding. Now, that's after many years of 10 steps. At first, I'm like, you're an idiot. I'm not lying. don't call me a liar. And now I have to make an amends, right? Because I've stepped on the toes and I've retaliated because of my pain. So it's so important that I start to make these connections, connecting the dots and stringing together and understanding my past and where this comes from, so that I don't continue it with my future relationships one day at a time. Because there's somewhere in me now that knows that you're not trying to hurt me. But I walked through life for many decades thinking that everyone was trying to hurt me. And I had to protect myself at all costs. And I drank over that, and I worked over that, and I kept a distance from you over that, and all sorts of things. And this is a big pattern that I've learned in my life. And it's easy for me to be loving and generous and open today because I recognize that that was a pattern and I want to let go of it. That is a character defect I told God, you can let go of. I am now willing and ready for you to take that from me. And he did. So even alcohol, the next one, for by this time, sanity will have returned. What is sanity? What does that mean? Well, it says that we're mentally defective when we take the first drink. It says that in the big book, even in the doctor's opinion. It goes all the way back there to Silkworth, called us mental defectives. So the sanity will return when the alcohol is out of my body and I'm not obsessing the same way. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as if from a hot flame. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. Automatically for me. No, automatically with a lot of work, with a lot of prayer. We will see that our new attitude, which is a psychic change, which is spiritual awakening, which we find in the back of the book, that explanation, has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. Yeah, it comes. 26 years and 2 months. I always say, like, all of a sudden, because I kept doing this work over and over again. Those 24 hours add up. My bank is huge. I had little coins in my spiritual bank at first, but I keep plugging away, and it ends up being a pile. That is the miracle of it, and it is a miracle. What is a miracle? A psychic change. A change in our thinking. That's what a miracle is. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, long pause, safe and protected. That is part of my prayer. When I ask God in the morning, I ask him to hold me in his loving arms. I ask him to take me in his pocket throughout the day. And I ask him to make me feel safe and protected. You see, because you get really, really big when I don't feel safe and protected by God. I use it as a sandwich metaphor, okay? So God is the tuna fish, the egg salad, the ham, the cheese, and then you're the bread and I'm the bread, okay? And we've got God in between, safe and protected. You can't hurt me when God's in the middle. But all of a sudden, you become the tuna fish. My mother is my egg salad for many decades. She's the sun, the moon, and the stars. My mother gets angry or disappointed with me. That is the end of it. I have to crawl into a hole until she's not angry with me again. That was when I had a smaller God. That's when I had a smaller, higher power, that my mother came in and became between me and God, blocking me. I was allowing her to block me. I was doing that. That's my part. She's very powerful. She really is. Wow, she's so powerful. But I was allowing that to happen. I wasn't setting that boundary to say, God, I need you to be bigger. I need you to come in. My prayer today, a lot of days, is, God, please take my mother away from me. Keep her in your loving arms today. Put her in daycare, your daycare, look after her. That's what I need to do, because if not, that's when I start feeling like you have offended me. You have hurt me. You have been disloyal to me. Boy, that's a lot of power. Whew, you are very powerful all of a sudden that you've been able to do all of that. No, I've allowed you. I've allowed you to come between me and God. And that's why I'm not feeling safe and secure. I'm not feeling in a position of neutrality. I'm not feeling sane. And I start fighting anything and anyone. Okay. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. I love that they say the problem. They don't say the alcohol. They say the problem. And the problem is always me, right? It's always my interpretation of what you have done to me that is my problem. It does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience. So I have to have had a spiritual experience, a psychic change, a miracle to have this experience. And these are the promises of step 10. That is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. What is that? Now I have to work out. What is fit spiritual condition? Oh my goodness. It's just an order. I can't go through with it. Well, you know, I like to sleep 9 hours a night. I just like to do that. I like to have 3 meals a day. I like to do that. You know, I like to shower and wash my hair. And these are the things that, you know, I like to do to feel better. I know that when I was drinking, I probably was down to 1 meal a day. I don't remember brushing my teeth ever when I was drinking, really, ever. I know I didn't have a doctor. I didn't have a dentist. I didn't have a gynecologist. Those were just not things that I did when I was drinking. So those are some of the things that I do physically to keep fit, is that I have doctors now. I have dentists. I shower, I brush my teeth, I eat, I sleep. So what am I doing spiritually? I heard recently that if you pray once a day, it's meditational. But if you pray twice a day, it's inspirational and even transformational. And that's what I want. I want a transformation. I don't want to be the woman who was taking off her clothes on Crescent Street, singing Madonna, laughing hysterically drunk at the age of 22. That's not who I want to be anymore. I want to be a woman of dignity and grace. I want to be spiritually fit. I don't want to be fighting everyone and everything. I don't want to be waking up with 3 hours of sleep and going into work and yelling and screaming at everyone at work. I don't want to be hired by people who hired me because I yelled and screamed at everybody at work. You know, I was known as the heavy. I don't want to be that anymore. That was exhausting. So for me, spiritual fitness is I wake up in the morning and I hit my knees. I hold my hands out. This was something I learned many, many years ago. I hold my hands out with my palms up in the air. And like a pendulum, I start pushing up the air. I start doing little circles and I start pushing up the air. And after a little bit of time, I start feeling a weight on me. That is how I know that God's presence is there. And after I feel that weight, I start talking. And I tell him everything. I tell him all the things I love. I tell him all the things I hate. I tell him all the things I dream of, because I'm co-creating with God. I'm co-creating with God. God has a plan for me. I'm usually rearranging the plan, or trying to, if I take my will back. But in that prayer and meditation, I'm listening. I'm talking and then I'm listening. There have been times in my life where I have heard certain words and I have felt certain energies enter my body. I can only count them on one hand, but every time it has shifted my life completely. I pray for every single person who's sick. I pray for every single person who's pregnant. I then ask God to take all the people I don't like and put them in his pocket and keep them away from me that day, because I'm just not strong enough some days, you know. I'm just not strong enough. I'm a spiritual midget, not a spiritual giant, and people are going to get under my skin. You know, I'm powerless in that sense. I then get up and I speak to 6 fellows a day. That's what I do. And I sponsor women and I read through the book. I have 5 spiritual books on the go all the time. There's one on my desk right here. I'm reading this one, Melanie Beattie, and she started Codependency. I read Louise Hay. I go all over the book, you know, with people who are writing about spirituality, because I always say I'm an amateur. This is not my profession. This is not a full-time gig for me. I'm only doing this 20, 30 minutes a day. So I want to go to those who are really doing this on it. So that's part of my spiritual fitness. Okay. Next paragraph is all about the prayer. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and its action and rest on our laurels. That's our high horse. Oh, well, I'm so-and-so sponsored and I'm so-and-so sober and I don't need to do this every day. Our laurels. But here's a warning. We are headed for trouble if we do. For alcohol is a subtle foe. There's another warning. A third warning, we are not cured of alcoholism. And that's what we're talking about here, is alcoholism. We put down the drink, and what are we going to pick up to replace it? Fighting anyone and anything? Not being effective? Being insane? Taking somebody else's inventory? Just a few examples that I come up with on a daily basis. What we really have is a daily reprieve. That's a relief, that's a rest, contingent based on the maintenance, there's our spiritual fitness, of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. And here's the 10-step prayer. How can I best serve thee? Capital, God word, long pause, capital, thy, God, will. Now here he's put in parenthesis, not mine, and be done. Oh my God, Bill, this is how silly and ridiculous and short-sighted and forgetful he thinks we are, that he has to mention God twice in that sentence. How can I best serve thee, thy will? And then he still has to say, not yours, stupid, be done. He's really drilling it home, isn't he? I just love the 10-step prayer. It's the really funny prayer we have in the big book. It's a funny prayer. It's like, duh, God, not you, duh, will be done. Okay, thank you. Loud and clear, loud and clear. Because I know what happens when Holly's will comes in. Oh my goodness. I'm a director, I'm a producer, I'm an actor, I'm hiring, I'm firing, bang, 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 bang. It's like the Old West and I'm coming to shoot them up. I'm taking names. No, that's Holly's will. That's not God's will. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly, kind of like continuous. We can exercise our will power along this line all we wish. That's a warning, but it is the proper use of the will. It's God's use of the will. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him, God, who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital, the word vital means life or death, sixth sense. But we must go further, and that means more action. And the more action is pen to paper. What does the sixth sense mean? The sixth sense for me is, and I'm not a whisper girl, you should do this. What? Sorry, I couldn't hear that. What? And then it's a tap. And then it's a frying pan right upside my head. That's when I start to pay attention. I don't hear the whispers necessarily. I need it to be blatant and obvious. But I know when it's blatant and obvious that it's God's will. I know when it's something that I couldn't have even thought up myself, that it's God's will. And that has happened so many times in my sobriety, what I call God shots, where things just happen in my life that I didn't bank on, I didn't think of. I was sitting in my office in 1996, in 1997. I was a film producer in Montreal. I was drinking daily at that point. My life was falling apart. I was 22 years old. I felt like I was 102 years old. And we had a big famous action, movie actor coming in from LA, and all the boys were excited and they couldn't wait for him to get there. I didn't know if they wanted to date him or hang out with him. They were so excited. And he walked into the office on a Friday. I had been drinking on Thursday night. I was hungover. I was in a dark editing room. And he walked into the office. And for some reason that day, not one of the men in my office, and I was the only woman, was there. It was just me and him. And I recognized him, but he recognized me. And what I mean by that is he took one look at me and he saw right through me. It was the first time I knew the gig was up and that he recognized me. And within 3 weeks, that man 12-stepped me. He had 14 years of sobriety. His wife had 14 years of sobriety. They have been in my life 26 and a half years. And that was God coming in and doing for me what I could not do for myself. I did not have a God consciousness or a sixth sense to think that alcohol was my problem or to call Alcoholics Anonymous in the phone book. I didn't even think it would be there. It was a secret society after all, isn't it? But there he walked into my office and he saw right through me. And he told me afterwards that it was tribal recognition. He saw me sitting there and he just knew I needed help. That's God's will. That was the sixth sense. And I had enough sense that I felt a connection with him immediately when he started telling me his story. And, that's what happens for us when we are open, when we have that sixth sense, when God really comes in and it's his will. Because it was not my plan to get sober at 23. That was not my plan. All right, let's turn to the 12 and 12. Now, the 12 and 12 was written in 1950, right? It's written a dozen years after the big book, and they're going into things in a little bit more detail. They've learned a lot. They've got 100 members or more at this point. No, a lot more than 100 members. And so in step 10, now they start talking about emotional sobriety. This is something that Bill is coming to. What is emotional sobriety? Well, first there's the physical sobriety, right? Where I'm literally trying to dry out from the alcohol, which, took me a long time. I craved sugar. I couldn't get out of bed for the first 2-3 years of my sobriety. I was really in a low slump. If you're feeling like that, I sponsor a lot of women in those first 2 years. We have a physicality that we can't get through. But then they call stage 2 emotional sobriety, another book that I'm reading by Ernie Larson. It's literally called Stage 2 Recovery. And he starts to talk about, what is that next phase when we get through our steps, when we worked with a sponsor, when we worked with sponsees, and we're starting to rest on our laurels, maybe. Maybe we're not doing a 10th step all the time. Maybe that resentment is, lasting a little bit longer. The gleam of Alcoholics Anonymous is wearing off. The rose-colored glasses are getting foggy. Then we step into emotional sobriety. And that's what they talk about here and warn us of. The first things that they do on page 88 and 89, and I will be jumping around, but in that first paragraph, the last line says, then becomes the acid test, can we stay sober? Keep in emotional balance and live to good purpose under all condition. Oh my goodness, under all condition. Well, what does that mean? Oh, they're using the C word again. A continuous look at our assets and liabilities. Now, they've never talked about our assets before. This is one of the first times that they start talking about our assets. We've been talking about our defects. Our assets and liabilities, and a real desire to learn and grow by this means are necessities. A few lines down, it says, an unsparing self-survey and criticism. Again, this is my personal inventory, not your inventory. And then they say it twice. For the wise has always known that no one can make much of his life until self-searching becomes a regular habit, until he is able to admit, accept, and correct. Admit and accept what he finds until he patiently and persistently tries to correct what is wrong. Admit, accept, correct. On the top of page 89, again, it says it requires an admission, correction of errors now. That's what I'm trying to do in step 10. They're fooling me. They're getting me to write out your name in the first column and what you did to me. But then those last two columns that we're going to go over today is all about me, my reaction to it. You know, you can call me a turkey. You can say, you know what, Holly, I don't think it's a good idea that you're sober. I think you should drink again. You were a lot more fun. Oh my God, I'm so wounded. And I write about it. But then in that fourth column, it's like, well, why am I breaking my anonymity to somebody who's not in AA? Or why am I listening to somebody who isn't spiritually fit? Or why am I making this person my egg salad, my tuna fish, my ham and cheese, my brie on a baguette? Why? Why did I do that? That's what I am doing. And then I go into my defective character of feeling lonely and fearful and abandoned if you don't have a good opinion of me. And that's something that I work very, very hard on, is not getting my validation from outside of myself. My sponsor told me that it was sick. You know, it's only a sick person that gets their validation from outside of themselves. And I thought, that's all I do. I am so sick. And I started working on that 25 months ago with her in September of 2021. And I will tell you, I was speaking at the Keystone Conference in Winnipeg in October, not knowing why I was there. Why am I in Winnipeg? Why am I speaking here? And when I got up that morning and I hit my knees and I started to pray, I heard God say, you no longer need to worry about this. And it vanished. It vanished. Just like that. All of a sudden, 26 years and 2 months, all of a sudden, after me working on it for 27 months and really 49 years, it felt like, it vanished. Because I wasn't able to admit and I wasn't able to accept. So therefore, I wasn't able to correct. At the bottom of page 88, it says, an emotional hangover, the direct result of yesterday and sometimes today, excesses of negative emotion, anger, fear, jealousy, and the like. If we would like to live serenely today and tomorrow, we certainly need to eliminate these hangovers. This doesn't mean we need to wander morbidly around in the past. We don't? Oh my God, this was new information to me. I have been morbidly wandering around in the past. In fact, I've been gnawing and chewing on it. I've been vacationing morbidly around in the past. It was one of my favorite pastimes. If I would feel badly about myself, if I felt like I had done something wrong imperfectly, I would start morbidly reflecting, oh, well, you know, Holly, you've done this hundreds of times. Let's play the tape. Let's go through all of them. Let's have a little home movie of all the times you've done this. Boy, oh boy. And I wonder why I was walling around in self-pity, the swimming pool of self-pity. So that's how it happens. So let's go through on 84, the 4 ways that we can go through a 10th step so we don't have to have an emotional hangover, so we can start learning how to admit, accept, correct admissions now. The first one, which is what we're going to do, is a spot check inventory. Spot check inventory taken any time of the day whenever we find ourselves tangled up. So as soon as I start saying anything to myself, because I don't need you to call me a loser, I can call myself a loser all by myself. As soon as I start calling myself a loser, I have to get out a little pad of paper. I don't have my little pad of paper here, but it's about this size. And I carry one around in my car and my purse. And I have one on my desk usually. And I just start jotting out. And we're going to learn how to do that. I'm going to teach you how to do that in 3 minutes today so that we don't have to wander around. The second one is taken at day's end, when we review the happenings of the hours just past. Here we cast up a balance sheet, crediting ourselves for things well done and chalking up debits where due. Maybe you're a morning person. Julia Cameron, another book that I read, The Artist's Way, she developed a method over 35 years ago of as soon as she gets up in the morning, she empties her head, 2 to 3 pages of free thinking. You know, I have to make toast. I hate toast. I have to do laundry. I hate laundry. I'm a good person, but I hate my husband. Whatever is pouring out of your head, she just pours out into the paper. She does that in the morning. I like to do it at night too. I have a jammy routine, get into my jammies. You know, I have a whole bed routine and I like to journal write, or I have a book. On the outside of the book, it's called It Is Possible. And so when I'm feeling like nothing is possible, I write "it is possible" statements. And I tell you, I've been doing that book for years, and every single thing I have written in there has become possible. It really has. The third one is, in the company of a sponsor or spiritual advisor, we make a careful review of our progress since last time. So maybe you want to, write a little bit of a fourth step because you haven't been keeping up with your 10th. Maybe you've got 6 or 7 or 700 resentments towards one particular person that you haven't written out in a while, and they've been building up, and now the relationship seems like it's soured. So, I try to do that once a year with my sponsor, where I sit down and we just kind of, when something's really gnawing at me. And then the fourth one is the occasional retreat from the outside world. And I've got a committee, and we're doing a retreat in January in Montreal, which is crazy, but we've got women who have signed up, and they're very excited to go through the 12 steps, to do steps in the snow, we're calling it. And we're doing that I think in a month from today, actually. And that's very exciting. And, I love to shut down. I do 3 or 4 women's retreats a year, or we can go through the 12 steps, and I'm just kind of submerged hour after hour. There's no hiding from my feelings, and I just go through those. So I love doing those. On the bottom of the page, again, it says accurate self-appraisal. And then the next page, on page 90, in the first sentence of the third paragraph, it says, it is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something wrong with us. And with us is italicized like it's a prayer, and for me, that's be gentle. It's not right or wrong, good or bad. It's just that when I'm disturbed, I'm just feeling sensitive, angry, fearful. And I think, what's going on? Because when I'm really spiritually fit, I have no alcoholism. I've been, on a vacation with my family and going, oh my God, I've made a huge mistake. I'm so happy, joyous, and free. I'm not an alcoholic at all. And then I get a resentment and it pulls me back. But, there are those moments where something is wrong with us because I'm the only one I can change. I'm the only one I can change. Again, this was very new information to me around year 20. I had a mother-in-law who didn't like me. I might be the only one, but she really didn't like me. And I kept saying to my sponsor, this is what she said, this is what she did. And my sponsor would say, boy, she really doesn't like you. I say, yeah, I know. No, like she really, really doesn't like, I know, it's true. I mean, she hates you. I think she hates you. I'm like, okay, that was too much. Now you're hurting my feelings, But she said, what are you trying to do? Well, I want her to like me. Why? Why do you think you're so powerful that you are going to change her mind? Are you a mind changer? Are you a mind bender? That are you her higher power? And if you don't like her, why does it matter if she likes you? And what would you be doing if you weren't trying to suck up to her so dishonestly and make her like you? And I just blurted out, whatever I want. Well, why don't you do that? And that's what I started doing. And, my mother-in-law invited us on a week's vacation that she was going to pay for. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to die. And the vacation was like 3 months. And I just thought, I'm going to die for the next 90 days. And then I'm going to die during the vacation. Then I'm going to have so many 10 steps after that vacation. And my sponsor said, are you ready? Ready for what? Are you ready to tell her you can't go on the vacation? What? No, that's rude. I couldn't do that. Oh, I see. So you can see it and think it and gossip about it and feel it, but you can't be honest in a program of rigorous honesty and say it. Oh my God, what am I going to say? You're going to say, I can't go on vacation with you. She's going to ask why. You're going to say, because we don't get along. She's going to say, what? And so it took me a month to get ready to have this conversation. And I called up my mother-in-law and I said, I can't go on vacation with you. Why? Because you and I don't get along. And she said, it's true. Oh my God. She thought it too. And we were able to have a sit down and this huge, open and honest conversation about how I saw her seeing me, how she saw me seeing her, how, we had crossed paths, the communication. It has been smooth sailing ever since. A miracle, a wholesale miracle taken place. I had written out, oh my God, I can't even tell you how many 10 steps. I mean, I was 10 years into my marriage or more at that point of just hating this woman, hating me. And then poof, it was gone. So that's what we're talking about. I am no longer disturbed by her. I do no longer need her to like me. She no longer needs me to like her. In fact, I kind of do like her now that I'm not sucking up to her, and wanting her to validate me, making her my grilled cheese sandwich. She's just bread now. It says in the second paragraph, we start talking about justifiable anger. That was justifiable anger. Oh my God, she's so mean to me. Few people have been more victimized. Oh yes, victimized by resentments than we alcoholics. Sort of true. Turns out she's not an alcoholic. She felt victimized. A burst of temper could spoil a day. A well-nursed grudge could make us miserably ineffective, and it did tell us to grow in an effectiveness and understanding. Anger, that luxury of more balanced people, kept us on an emotional drag. These emotional dry benders led us straight to the bottle or other kinds of disturbances, jealousy, envy, self-pity, hurt pride. These kind of things hurt me way more than a drink at this point. It's to be sober and filled with this anger and rage where there's no relief. On the next page, again, it says, in all these situations, we need to practice self-restraint, honest analysis, a willing to admit when the fault is ours, an equal willingness to forgive. Forgive. Now they're using the F word. Oh my goodness. We haven't talked about forgiveness very often, have we, until step 10. And now the worst one. Oh my goodness. Get out your lip glue. This is the lip glue paragraph. Our first objective will be the development of self-restraint. Nothing pays off like restraint of pen and tongue. Oh my, how many emails have I sent in a burst of anger? How many texts? How many phone calls? I grew up with a mother and a grandmother, the phones that used to plug into the walls, the ones that you could slam down in their ear. Oh, that was a game. That was the favorite game of my mother and my grandmother, was calling each other, slamming each other's phones down in those ears, and then calling back to say, don't slam in my ear, and then they'd slam down. Oh my goodness. I was well taught, very well taught. And so it also says the opposite of this. Not just yelling and screaming and emailing and texting when we're angry, right? And I should never do anything when I'm emotional. I've been taught, wait 24 hours. Always wait 24 hours. But it says that we must avoid quick-tempered criticism or furious, power-driven argument, but the same goes for sulking and silent scorn. Oh, when somebody walks into a meeting and they just raise their eyebrows at you, but they can't even speak to you and they're gritting their teeth. That silent scorn can be just as hurtful. These are emotional booby traps, baited with pride and vengefulness, and our first job is to sidestep the traps. Oh my goodness. All right, on the next page, it talks about big shotism. When we're stepping on the toes of others. It's not just about me being the scapegoat or the martyr or the victim. I can also be the big shot. Oh, I'm Holly. I do a 10-step workshop. I have this many years of sobriety. Oh, blah, 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 me. Remembering that we are sober today only by the grace of God, and that any success we may be having is far more his success than ours. Humble, right? Now I'm going back to the humility of step 6 and 7 when I have forgotten it and I'm in step 10. And I have, given you a lecture, wagging my finger and wondering why you're so ticked off at me right now. Finally, we begin to see that all people, including ourselves, are to some extent emotionally ill as well as frequently wrong. And then we approach true tolerance and see what real love for our fellows actually means. Because the last line on page 92, I think, sums up an untreated 10th step. We can't stand it if we hate deeply. Not they can't stand it, but we can't stand it. Because when I put my head on the pillow at night, I know who I'm hating deeply. I know who I'm fighting with, maybe just in my head. And you have no idea. I know. On page 93, it says, we can try to stop making unreasonable demands upon those we love. We can show kindness where we had shown none. And with those we dislike, we can begin to practice justice and courtesy, perhaps going out of our way to understand and help them. And the 10th step prayer in this is a lot more succinct, but in that paragraph it says, not my will, but thine, God's, be done. And then this little prayer that follows, am I doing to others as I would have them do to me today? That was something I learned in terms of sponsorship, of meeting my sponsees where they're at, not where I'm at. People who aren't working a 12-step program, and I think secretly they're reading the book by themselves, figuring it all out, and then I can have that kind of conversation with them. It says at the bottom of 93, someone who knew what he was talking about once remarked that pain is the touchstone of all spiritual progress. That for me is what has helped me more in step 10. I am in pain. That is why I write out a 10th step. And I know that my spiritual progress is when I can accept, admit, correct, and see my part. If I have finished a 10th step and I am still talking about you, if I am still angry with you, write it out again. If that goes on, write it out again. If that goes on, write it out again. Because we're talking about continuing for a lifetime. And sometimes, I might have a little understanding and effectiveness for you on a Monday, but by Wednesday, you're a turkey again. And by Friday, I'm hating deeply. And I got to keep doing it. And I'm going to condense this because I don't want to take a lot of time, but I had a woman that I had a deep resentment towards. I had a cute little cottage that I had renovated and decorated, and I was going to rent it out, and I was going to find the perfect little Snow White to move into my cottage, and she was going to live happily ever after. And this beautiful woman walked in to my little cottage before I even put it on the market and said, is your cottage for rent? And I thought, oh, thank you, God. How did she know? Come this way. Oh, yes, this is my cottage. This is your home. And by the time we got to the second floor, she was bawling her eyes out, just beside herself. And my life is falling apart, and this and that, and him and her and them and this and that. Now, that involved my 7th tradition of being fully financially self-supporting, right? This is my cottage that I'm running at. This is that I own with my husband. Did I call my realtor? No. Did I call my sponsor? No. Did I call other friends of mine that rent? No. I said, oh my God, I am going to rescue you. You must live here. I will solve all your problems by living in my cottage. Please move in immediately. And she did. And within the first 4 hours of her moving in, I realized she was one of us. She was into the sauce. Her mother was there into the sauce, and they were screaming and yelling at me. They were screaming and yelling at the neighbor. They were screaming and yelling at the electrician was there. The electrician left, told me he was never coming back to my little Snow White cottage. So one of my dwarfs had already left. And all of a sudden, I was the wicked witch in this whole scenario, according to her. And I called up my AA sponsor. I called up my Al-Anon sponsor. I called up my real estate agent. I was a total victim. I came home crying. I didn't know what to do. And they said, tell her you'll tear up the contract and she can leave if she's so unhappy. And so the next morning I wrote to her, I will tear up the contract. You are free to leave. I will not hold you to this. Oh my God, I can't believe you're doing to this. You're kicking me out onto the street. Now I'll have nowhere to live in the snow. And there was nothing I could say that was going to do it right. And I thought, oh, poor me. Oh, poor me. Oh. And I wrote out a 10th step and I said, she, so mean, not liking my house, accusing me, you know, me, innocent, totally innocent, you know. I had to write that 10th step out 21 days in a row. And on the 21st day, after I had written a cease and desist letter, and she had written me a lawyer's letter, and it was getting ugly. On the 21st day, I realized that I had been wearing my cape that day. You know, the cape, the social justice warrior cape, where I'm going to save and rescue everyone in the world because I am now God, and they are moving into God's house. And that was my part. And I saw it very clearly. And I realized that I had to forgive myself and I had to forgive her. And I got down on my hands and knees and I said to God, God, please find her the Snow White cottage of her dreams. Please find her the home that she loves best. Please, please provide that for her if it is your will. Or if it is your will to make me suffer, then she can live in my house longer. No, I didn't add that. But the next day, she sent me a letter. Dear madam, I hate you so much that I'm moving out of your cottage. And she moved out. And, you know, I have to tell you, after that 21 days, I have no animosity for her today. I have all the compassion and love for her. I wish her, I still pray for her from time to time, hoping that maybe I meet her in the rooms one day and I can make a formal amends to her in the language that we share. But I see my part. And when my part is lifted, when my part is clear of that accept, admit, correct, poof, I do not hate deeply. I do not have to worry about restraint of pen and tongue. I can grow in understanding and effectiveness. And that is my experience. And that is why I'm sharing this workshop with all of you today, because I have had that freedom from bondage. And it has come slowly and quickly. So let's head into step 10, shall we? It's 11:03. We're right on time. All right. Debbie is going to put up the 5 columns that we're going to write. Please do this as imperfectly as possible, okay? This is just a sketch. This is for you. No one will read this. This will go into your memoirs, so you can just do this. So the first column is the who. It can also be people, institutions, or principles for whom I am angry, okay? But let's just say it's the who. So put a name, put anybody's name, put a name down. What is the cause? I always say, what did they do to me? You know, it's always in victimese that I speak, but what did they do to me? I ask myself why I am angry. What did they do to me to cause the anger? Or it could be the fear, or it could be the hurt. 3 is very simple. What did it affect in me? Did it affect my self-esteem, my security, my ambition, my personal or sex relationships? You know, in the case of the renter, it affected my self-esteem because I was so proud of this cottage and doing it all by myself. It affected my security because now I had somebody in there that was very unhappy. It affected my ambition of course, being the best landlord with the best landlord award of the year in my little neighborhood. It affected my personal relationship with this woman because at a certain moment, we couldn't even speak. We were speaking through lawyers. And it affected my sex relations because I was talking to my husband about it endlessly. There was no peace in the house. So it affected everything for me. What did I do? Well, I told you how I had to walk through. What did I do? I mean, at first I did nothing, you know, and then I got honest and I was willing to accept, correct, and admit that I had not done my due diligence, checked in with anyone. I had been, you know, wheeling and everything in all my affairs. I had leapt before I looked, all of it. That's what I had done, you know, and I had thought that I was playing God. I was going to rescue this woman and save her. And then I go into the defects of character, okay? So the defects of character we're going to have on a different sheet. So I just want to make sure everybody's going to have 5 columns on their page. Just, put some lines down, whatever page you have, lined or unlined. The first is the who, what did they do? What did it affect? And then briefly, what did I do? Oh, we didn't talk about the story. No story. The story is the screenplay, the, playwright that you have not become, where, and then he said, and then she said, and then I did, and then he said, and then she did. If I were to boil it all down, who? The renter. What did she do? She showed up looking for a home. That's what she did. She showed up looking for a home. My goodness, how dare she? What did I do? I thought I was going to save her by providing a home for her. She did tell me all her problems. That's what she did, which incited it. But I was the one without boundaries. I can hear your problems without going into rescue and savior mode, but no, not then. Now, maybe, but not then. So what did she do? She came to me with her problems and looking for a place. I supplied her with a place, and I thought I was going to rescue and save her. And then that goes into my defects of character. So eliminate your story. Try to really boil it down. My husband left me. He ran away with the secretary. He didn't pay child support. I've hated him ever since. He rubs it in my face. Who? My husband. What did he do? He stopped loving me. That's what he did. He stopped loving me. Plain and simple. That's what I wanted. I wanted his love, and he stopped loving me. All the other details really don't matter. And it's the details that I get into that then I can't see the forest through the trees, and then I can't admit except correct because I'm so focused on what you have done to me. So now Debbie's going to put up our second image, which is the defects. This is how I'm really going to get honest. Okay, so we're going to take those 5 words that we've heard before, the selfish, self-seeking, dishonest, and frightened, which a lot of times I would say, I don't think I'm a lot of those things, but this was broken down. I first received this from my grant sponsor, Ava L. In New York City. I believe she got it from Cookie in Minnesota, but I have seen this all over AA, and it was brought to me 20 years ago. So selfishness. Not seeing the other person's point of view, problems, or needs, wanting things my way, wanting special treatment, wanting others to control or dominate, thinking I'm better, wanting to be the best, thinking others are jealous or wanting to be like me, being miserly or possessive, wanting more than my share, reacting from self-loathing and self-righteousness, too concerned about me, my needs, and my wants, trying to control how people think or perceive of me, image management, wanting to look good or be liked. Gee, I'd have to tick almost every single one of those. I don't think she was jealous of me. Then the self-seeking. The self-seeking is getting my validation from outside of myself. The selfishness is all about me, how I think you see me, but the self-seeking is how I want you to see me. So that's seeking myself in others, getting my value from other people's behavior and opinions, manipulating others to do my will, putting them down internally or externally to build myself up, engaging in gossip, acting superior, acting to fill a void. Oh, I want something in my life, so I'm going to be, the best sponsor, but then I'm going to become your higher power as a sponsor. That's the void. Engaging in gluttony or lusting after someone else's experience, ignoring others' needs, trying to control others, getting revenge when I didn't get what I wanted, holding on to a resentment, acting to make me feel good, playing victim, protector, or savior, because as we know, we don't know what gray is. We only know black and white. So I can be the victim and I can be the savior at the same time. That's what I was in this situation, Oh, she doesn't like my cottage, poor me. It was a business arrangement, plain and simple. Dishonest. Do you think you can make it a little bit smaller so it fits on the page, perhaps? Dishonest, not seeing or admitting where I am at fault, having a superior attitude, thinking I am better, blaming others for my problems. I did that. Not admitting where I have done the same. I have been angry at landlords in the past too. Not expressing feelings or ideas, lying, cheating, stealing, hiding reality, stubbornly holding on to inaccurate beliefs. It was an inaccurate belief that I knew what I was getting myself into, and I turned a blind eye. Breaking rules, lying to myself, exaggerating or minimizing the story, setting myself up to be harmed or wronged, expecting others to be what they're not. That's my favorite. I use that one a lot, unfortunately. Being perfectionistic. And then frightened. I'm frightened of people's opinions, rejection, abandonment, loneliness, and physical injury or
I think you got muted.
of my own inferiority and criticism from others, and expressing my ideas and others and my feelings in case they reject me, getting trapped, exposure, or embarrassment. And then this little one of inconsiderate, not considering the other person's point of view. She was scared and she thought she had made a bad business deal. That's what I didn't consider. So it says, have you considered that ... and fill in the blank? And am I treating myself with respect? So those are our defects of character. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put pen to paper. I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock. I want you to write out very briefly those first 3 columns. Don't spend too much time on it, because the accept, correct, and admit are columns 4 and 5. What did I do? You know, I get frightened, I drink over it, I eat over it, I yell over it, I scream over it, I break friendships over it, I move over it, I pull geographics over it. You know, think about, what do I do when something like this, when a resentment crops up? You know, what is my action taking? I say nothing. You know, it's a big deal not to say anything as well. That is an action. And so I'm going to start the clock and we're going to write out a 10th step. Are you ready? Here we go. Okay, that's our time. So we'll go back to the screen of everybody's little face so we can see everybody, and we'll go to a show of raised hands. I don't know if we want to stop the recording at this point, because people are going to be sharing their 10th steps. So what do we normally do, Debbie? Thank you all so much for being here this morning. Really, truly, I am humbled, and I'm so glad that I get to be here. And there's so many of you that have come to my other 10-step workshops, you know, Kimmy and Dembry, and I'm going to forget somebody for sure. Frida has been here before, and, you know, a lot of you who are new, and please continue, use that C word as much as you can. Continue, continue, continue for a lifetime. God bless you all. And I'll put my contact information in this chat. I would love to hear your 10 steps. Honestly, I really would, because it saves me from just going over my own every day. Thanks again.
Holly, will you close us with a prayer or a reading of your choice, please?
My goodness, please, let's say the 10-step prayer, shall we? Let's say that funny 10-step prayer together. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. Amen.
Amen. All right, everybody can unmute and thank our speaker, Holly. Thank you, Holly. That was beautiful.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you
so
much. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, beautiful.
Love you all.
Everybody for being